"You are free to go," commanders told Japanese female prison of wars, until they begged, "We want to stay." August 7th, 1945. Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. The metal cup trembled in Hana Ishida's hands as she stared at the steaming liquid inside. Tea. Real tea. Not the bitter bark water she had drunk for months on Saipan. The American soldier who had poured it, a young man with kind eyes and a Wisconsin accent she couldn't understand, had smiled and said something soft before walking away. She waited for the trick, for the cruelty she had been taught to expect. It never came. 43 Japanese women had arrived at the camp that morning, transported from holding facilities in California. They had been captured across the Pacific Theater. Nurses from field hospitals, civilian workers from military installations, a handful of women who had simply been in the wrong place when American forces advanced. All of them had heard the stories. American soldiers were barbarians who showed no mercy. Death was preferable to capture. Some had tried to follow that final instruction, but survival had chosen them instead. The train journey from California had taken 4 days. Unlike the cramped cargo holds they expected, they rode in passenger cars with cushioned seats. The windows weren't barred. Food appeared 3 times daily, more than they had seen in months. When the train crossed into Wisconsin, one woman named Yuki Takahashi had pressed her face against the glass, counting the farmhouses blazing with electric lights. Every single one. In Japan, even before the fire bombings, such abundance had been impossible. At the camp gates, they had lined up expecting processing that matched the propaganda. Strip searches, beatings, humiliation designed to break whatever spirit remained. Instead, American soldiers, including several women in uniform, had conducted medical examinations with surprising gentleness. One nurse, speaking through a Japanese-American translator, had apologized for the discomfort of a necessary vaccination. Apologized. To prisoners. To enemies. Naomi Sato, 42 years old and the oldest among them, had worked as an administrator in a military hospital on Tinian. She understood enough English to catch fragments of conversation between the American guards. They were discussing baseball scores and weekend plans, complaining about the Wisconsin mosquitoes. Normal talk. Human talk. Not the cruel boasting she expected from conquerors. The barracks they were assigned exceeded anything they had known even before the war. Wooden buildings with real beds. Thin mattresses, but mattresses nonetheless. Pillows. Blankets that smelled of soap. Electric lights operated by switches. Flush toilets. Hot showers. Naomi had calculated that this prisoner facility offered better conditions than most Japanese civilian housing she had seen. That first night, none of them slept. They lay in their beds, waiting for the inevitable. The abuse would come after dark, they reasoned. The kindness was performance, designed to lower their guard. Hours passed. Guards walked by on routine patrols. The expected violence never materialized. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Hannah clutched the empty teacup as morning light filtered through the barracks windows. She had survived the night unmolested. They all had. Around her, 42 other women were reaching the same impossible conclusion. Either this was an elaborate psychological torture, or everything they had been taught about their enemies was wrong. The second possibility was more terrifying than the first. In the distance, she could hear American voices, laughter from the guard quarters, the ordinary sounds of men starting their day. No screams, no gunfire, no sounds of suffering at all. Just the mundane rhythm of a military camp in rural Wisconsin where the summer corn grew tall and the morning air smelled of breakfast cooking in the mess hall. Breakfast they would be fed, another impossibility made real. August 8th, 1945. The second day brought confirmation that the previous day had not been an elaborate dream. At 6:30 in the morning, a young American corporal knocked on their barracks door. Actually knocked, then waited for acknowledgement before entering. He carried a clipboard and spoke through the translator, a Japanese-American sergeant from Hawaii named George Nakamura, who had volunteered for this assignment. Breakfast would be served in 30 minutes, Nakamura translated. They could come to the mess hall or have food brought to them if they felt uncomfortable. The choice was theirs. This concept, that prisoners might have choices, seemed as foreign as the Wisconsin landscape outside their windows. Yuki convinced 5 others to accompany her to the mess hall. Better to see the truth directly than wait for it to arrive. They walked, across the compound in a tight group, expecting stares and hostility from the American soldiers they passed. Instead, most simply nodded or looked away, granting them privacy. One sergeant removed his cap as they passed, a gesture of respect that left Yuki momentarily frozen. The mess hall contained long tables filled with American soldiers eating breakfast. A separate section had been prepared for the Japanese women, not hidden away but simply designated as their space. The food itself shocked them into silence. Scrambled eggs, thick slices of bacon, toast with butter and jam, fresh milk, coffee with real sugar, portions that exceeded what Japanese officers received even at the height of the empire. Private Tom Reed, barely 20 years old with red hair and freckles, was assigned to their section. He moved carefully, speaking softly through Nakamura, asking if they needed anything. When one woman, her hands shaking, accidentally knocked over her glass of milk, Reed's reaction revealed everything. He smiled, waved off her frantic apologies, and returned moments later with a fresh glass and a clean towel. No anger, no punishment. Just human kindness to another human who had made a simple mistake. Naomi watched this interaction while calculating the mathematics of abundance. The milk that had spilled, perhaps 8 ounces, would have been a luxury for an entire Japanese family. Here it was replaced without thought, without forms to fill out, without ration cards to surrender. The Americans treated milk the way Japan had once treated water, as something too plentiful to worry about. After breakfast, they received clothing. Not prison uniforms, but simple civilian dresses, modest and practical, along with undergarments, shoes that fit, and toiletries, real soap that smelled of flowers, toothbrushes and tooth powder, combs, small mirrors, items they had not seen in over a year. The American supply sergeant, a woman in her 30s named Margaret Chen, demonstrated each item through Nakamura, her manner professional but not cold. That afternoon brought the most devastating kindness. Sergeant David Miller, the camp medic, conducted follow-up medical examinations. A tall man with gentle hands and sad eyes, Miller worked with an interpreter to explain each procedure before performing it. He treated infected wounds, provided medication for persistent coughs, and spent extra time with women who showed signs of malnutrition or trauma. When he examined Hana, Miller noticed the poorly healed burn scar on her arm from the Saipan bombing. Without being asked, he applied new medication and fresh bandages, then gave her a supply to change them daily. His touch was clinical but careful, avoiding any hint of impropriety. When finished, he met her eyes and spoke slowly so Nakamura could translate. "You've been through something terrible, but you're safe now. We're going to help you get well." That evening, 43 women gathered in their barracks trying to reconcile reality with everything they had believed. The kindness was systematic, not accidental. Every American they encountered behaved with professionalism and basic human decency. No one had raised a voice, no one had raised a hand. The monsters of propaganda did not exist. In their place were ordinary people doing ordinary jobs with ordinary compassion. August 9th, 1945. The morning brought news that would change everything, though none of the women understood its significance yet. Through crackling radio speakers in the administration building, American officers received reports of a second atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. The war, they whispered to each other, would end within days. In the women's barracks, this information arrived filtered through rumor and confusion, another impossible development in a week of impossibilities. By now, small routines had developed. Wake at 6. Breakfast at 7. Morning chores, not forced labor, but simple. Maintenance of their own living space. Afternoons free to rest, read from the camp library, or walk the designated areas. Evening meal at 5. Lights out at 9. The structure was military, but the execution was humane, designed to provide order without oppression. Yuki had begun helping in the camp kitchen, not because she was forced, but because sitting idle made her feel useless. The American cooks, a mixture of soldiers from various backgrounds, welcomed her assistance with genuine appreciation. They taught her to operate industrial stoves and refrigerators, equipment she had never imagined existed. The head cook, a large Italian-American man from New Jersey named Sergeant Tony Marconi, demonstrated how to make his grandmother's bread recipe, laughing at his own failures to explain in gestures what Nakamura struggled to translate. The kitchen revealed more evidence of American abundance. Walk-in refrigerators filled with meat, vegetables, dairy products. Dry storage areas stocked with flour, sugar, coffee, canned goods. Marconi explained through Nakamura that this was a small camp with limited supplies. Limited. The storage room contained more food than Yuki's entire neighborhood in Yokohama had seen in the final year of the war. During afternoon free time, Hana discovered the camp library. An American lieutenant named Sarah Martinez ran the small facility, her enthusiasm for books transcending language barriers. Through Nakamura, Martinez offered Hana books in Japanese, volumes collected from Japanese-American families who had donated them to help with prisoner welfare. The gesture, that Americans would think to provide reading material in the prisoner's own language, seemed almost absurd in its thoughtfulness. That afternoon, Sergeant Miller conducted a group health education session. Using charts and Nakamura's translation, he explained nutrition, basic hygiene, and the importance of mental health recovery. He spoke about trauma, about the difficulty of processing terrible experiences, about the normalcy of nightmares and anxiety. He offered counseling services, group discussions, anything that might help them heal. "You've survived something few people can imagine," Miller said, his words flowing through Nakamura's careful translation. "Your bodies need time to recover, but so do your minds and hearts. We're here to help with all of it. You're not just prisoners to process and forget. You're human beings who deserve care and dignity." Naomi, listening in the back row, felt something crack inside her chest. She had spent months believing that capture meant death or worse. She had accepted that fate, made peace with it. Now this American medic was offering counseling services, discussing mental health, treating their emotional wounds as seriously as their physical ones. The Japanese military had never acknowledged that soldiers could suffer psychological damage. Trauma was weakness. Pain was duty. Yet here was the enemy, the supposed barbarian, explaining that healing required more than just food and shelter. That evening, Private Reed brought mail to the barracks. Not mail for them, they had no one to write to yet, but he carried magazines and newspapers in English, offering them through Nakamura in case anyone wanted to practice reading or simply look at the pictures. Life magazine, Saturday Evening Post, newspapers from Milwaukee and Chicago. Reed lingered, answering questions about America through the translator, describing his hometown in Iowa, the farm where he grew up, his mother's cooking, his little sister's graduation. August 12, 1945, Colonel James Anderson requested a meeting with all 43 Japanese women. The announcement came after breakfast, delivered by Nakamura with unusual formality. They gathered in the recreation hall at 10 in the morning, anxious and uncertain. This was it, they believed. The performance would end. The real treatment would begin. Anderson entered, with Sergeant Miller and Lieutenant Martinez. The colonel was 52 years old, a career officer with gray temples and tired eyes that had seen too much war. He waited until everyone was seated, then spoke slowly so Nakamura could translate each sentence completely. "Ladies, I have important information to share with you. 3 days ago, the Emperor of Japan announced Japan's intention to surrender. The war is effectively over. Within days, perhaps weeks, formal surrender documents will be signed. You are no longer enemy combatants. You are prisoners of war whose status will change to repatriates, awaiting transportation home." The room erupted in whispers. Home, Japan, return. Words that should have brought relief, but instead created complicated emotions none of them were prepared to process. Anderson raised his hand for quiet. "Under the Geneva Conventions and the terms being negotiated, you are free to return to Japan. The United States government will arrange your transportation, provide documentation, and ensure your safe passage. You can go home." More whispers. Yuki gripped Hana's hand. Naomi stared at the floor. However, Anderson continued, and something in his tone made everyone focus completely. "I want you to understand that you have time to make this decision. The logistics of repatriation will take months. During that time, you will remain here at Camp McCoy as our guests, not our prisoners. You will continue to receive the same care, the same treatment, the same respect you have experienced these past days." Nakamura translated carefully, making sure every word was understood. "I want to be absolutely clear about something," Anderson said, his voice firm but kind. "You are free to go. That is your right, and we will honor it completely. But you are also free to stay, at least temporarily, while you consider your options. Some of you may have family waiting in Japan. Some of you may not know what you're returning to. Either way, we want you to make this decision from a place of safety and clear thinking, not from fear or pressure." The colonel paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "In my 30 years of military service, I have learned that doing the right thing is more important than following convenient orders. You women have been through hell. You deserve time to heal before making decisions about your future. So take that time. We're not pushing you out the door. You're welcome here for as long as you need." After Anderson left, the women sat in stunned silence. Free to go meant free to leave this place of unexpected kindness, this bubble of safety in a world that had shown them only cruelty. Free to return to a Japan devastated by fire bombings, atomic weapons, and defeat. Free to face whatever remained of their former lives. That afternoon, Nakamura distributed Red Cross forms, allowing them to send messages to family in Japan to learn who had survived and what conditions existed. The forms, represented both hope and dread. Some women filled them out immediately, desperate for information. Others, including Hana, held the blank paper and wondered if anyone remained to receive the message. By evening, the reality settled in. They could leave, but leaving meant returning to destruction. They could stay, but staying meant accepting kindness from former enemies. Neither option felt simple. Neither option felt safe. August 14th, 1945. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement reached Camp McCoy through shortwave radio. Nakamura translated the broadcast for the Japanese women, his voice breaking at certain passages. The war was over. Japan had surrendered unconditionally. Everything they had believed about inevitable victory, about death before dishonor, about the divine right of their cause, had ended with one radio transmission. The American soldiers celebrated quietly, respectfully, aware that their relief came from ending a war that had devastated the very women now in their care. No one gloated. No one mocked. When Sergeant Marconi opened bottles of beer in the kitchen that evening, he offered one to Yuki through Nakamura. To peace, he said simply. To peace and going home. But where was home? That question haunted the barracks that night as 43 women wrestled with impossible choices. Naomi lay awake, calculating. She had a sister in Hiroshima, or she had before August 6th. The Red Cross had no information yet. Her parents were dead, killed in the Tokyo fire bombings. Her husband had died at Iwo Jima. What exactly was she returning to? Yuki's situation was different, but equally complicated. Her family ran a small restaurant in Osaka. The last letter she received, months ago, described food shortages and mandatory war production. They were alive but struggling. She should want to help them, to return and rebuild. Yet every day at Camp McCoy, she found herself less certain. The Americans had shown her what life could be, when basic needs were met, when kindness was policy rather than exception. 3 days after the surrender announcement, Sergeant Miller organized informal counseling sessions. Not mandatory, just available for anyone who wanted to talk through their feelings about repatriation. Hana attended, sitting across from Miller, while Nakamura translated. I thought I would be happy, Hana admitted. The war is over. I survived. I can go home. But I don't feel happy. I feel confused. Is that wrong? Miller shook his head. It's completely normal. You've experienced trauma, then unexpected kindness, and now you're facing uncertainty about the future. Your feelings don't have to make logical sense right now. They just have to be felt and processed. In Japan, we were taught that Americans were devils, Hana continued. That capture meant torture and death. But you gave me tea. You treated my wounds. You speak to me like I'm a person, not a thing. Everything I believed was a lie. How do I go back? To Japan knowing that? How do I face people who still believe the lies? This was the real crisis, Miller recognized. Not just the physical return to a destroyed country, but the psychological return to a society that had never experienced what these women now understood. They had seen their enemy's humanity. They had been shown mercy when they expected cruelty. That knowledge changed everything. By late August, a pattern emerged. Some women were filling out repatriation requests immediately, eager to return despite the uncertainty. Others held blank forms, unable to commit. A third group, small but growing, began asking Nakamura quiet questions about the possibility of staying longer, perhaps permanently. Private Reed noticed the hesitation during his evening rounds. He mentioned it to Lieutenant Martinez, who discussed it with Colonel Anderson. The colonel's response was characteristic. Then we let them know staying is an option. America's big enough for 43 more people who want to be here. On August 27th, Anderson held another meeting. I've noticed some of you are uncertain about repatriation. I want you to know that remaining in the United States is possible. It requires paperwork, bureaucratic processing, and patience. But if you want to stay, to build a life here, we will help make that happen. No pressure either way, just options. That night, Hana asked Yuki a question that neither could answer. If we stay, are we betraying Japan? And if we leave, are we betraying ourselves? September 3rd, 1945. The morning Hana received her first Red Cross reply changed everything. The thin paper trembled in her hands as Nakamura translated. Her mother was alive. Her younger brother had survived the Hiroshima bombing by being stationed in Kyushu. But her father and eldest brother were gone, killed in the March 10th Tokyo firestorm. The news should have clarified her decision. Family waited. She should go home. Instead, complicated everything. That afternoon, Sergeant Miller found her sitting alone behind the barracks, staring at the letter. He sat nearby, not intruding but present. After several minutes of silence, he spoke softly, while Nakamura translated. Bad news? Mixed news, Hannah replied. Some families survived, some didn't. I should feel relief. Instead, I feel guilty for being alive and safe while they suffered. Miller nodded. I lost my brother at Normandy. Spent months wondering why I was here, safe, while he died on a beach. My chaplain told me something useful. Survivor's guilt is real, but surviving isn't a sin. It's an opportunity to honor those who didn't make it by living well. They sat together as the Wisconsin sun dropped lower, two people from enemy nations finding common ground in shared grief. When Miller finally stood to leave, he offered Hannah a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a bar of Hershey's chocolate and a book of American poetry translated into Japanese. For difficult days, Miller said simply. Yuki's transformation came through different channels. In the kitchen with Sergeant Marconi, she was learning not just cooking techniques but American philosophy. Marconi talked while they worked, his words flowing through Nakamura's translations, about his family's immigration from Italy, about building a life in a new country, about food as a universal language. My grandmother came to America with nothing, Marconi explained while teaching Yuki to make pasta. Couldn't speak English, didn't know anyone, started with a tiny restaurant in Newark. Everyone said she'd fail. 40 years later, she employed 30 people. America's good for starting over, if you're brave enough to try. The pasta making became a metaphor. Marconi demonstrated how simple ingredients, flour and eggs, could transform into something new through patient work. The dough fought back at first, resistant and tough. But with persistent kneading, it became smooth and pliable, ready to become whatever shape you chose. Private Reed's friendship with Yuki developed through evening conversations. He would stop by the barracks during his rounds, ostensibly to check if anyone needed anything, but really to talk. Through Nakamura's translation, they discussed everything. Reed described Iowa cornfields that stretched forever. Yuki described Osaka's bustling markets before the war. They compared childhoods, finding surprising similarities despite vastly different cultures. My dad always said the world's full of good people who get bad orders, Reed told her one evening. I didn't understand until I got here. You're not my enemy. You're just someone who got caught in the same terrible machine I did. Other small kindnesses accumulated like interest. Lieutenant Martinez organized English lessons 3 times weekly. Not mandatory, but well attended. The women who participated discovered that learning the language opened doors to understanding their hosts better. They could now thank people directly, ask questions without waiting for translation, participate in conversations that built bridges. The camp library became Hannah's sanctuary. Martinez had acquired more Japanese books, novels, and poetry collections donated by Japanese-American families from Milwaukee. She also provided English-Japanese dictionaries and encouraged the women to practice by reading simple American books. Hannah started with children's stories, gradually building confidence. Naomi found unexpected connection through practical skills. She began helping the camp's administrative staff with filing and organization, work that required no language skills but demonstrated competence. The American clerks, initially skeptical, quickly recognized her efficiency. Within 2 weeks, they were asking her opinion on organizing systems and workflow improvements. These weren't dramatic moments, no grand gestures or stirring speeches, just daily interactions that slowly dismantled the wall between us and them. Every shared meal, every small courtesy, every moment of genuine human connection made returning to Japan's rigid certainties more difficult. The women weren't just being treated well, they were being treated as equals, as individuals with value beyond their national identity. September 10th, 1945. The day Private Reed brought his guitar to the recreation hall marked another turning point. Music, he had learned, required no translation. He played American folk songs, while a dozen Japanese women listened. Some tunes were melancholy, others upbeat. The women didn't understand the English lyrics, but recognized universal emotions in the melodies. Yuki surprised everyone by singing a Japanese folk song in return. Her voice, untrained but clear, filled the room with a melody about cherry blossoms and lost love. The American soldiers who had gathered to listen fell silent. When she finished, Reed had tears in his eyes. That was beautiful, he said through Nakamura. What was it about? Things that bloom briefly, then disappear, Yuki explained. Beauty that cannot last. It's a song about accepting impermanence. Reed strummed his guitar thoughtfully. We have songs like that too, about temporary things and permanent losses. Maybe people aren't so different everywhere. This revelation, that emotions transcended national boundaries, hit harder than any propaganda could have prepared them for. The Japanese military had taught that Americans were fundamentally different, almost another species. But grief sounded the same in any language. So did laughter, hope, and longing for home. Sergeant Miller's medical work deepened his connection with several women, particularly Hannah. During a routine checkup in mid-September, he noticed she had started keeping a diary in Japanese. He asked about it through Nakamura. "I'm writing about what's happening here," Hana explained. "Not for anyone else, for myself, so I can process these impossible experiences." Miller understood completely. "I keep a diary too. Started it after my brother died. Writing helps make sense of things that don't make sense." They began comparing notes about the therapeutic value of writing, discovering that coping mechanisms looked similar across cultures. Miller shared that he planned to study psychology after the war, specifically to help veterans process trauma. Hana admitted she had never considered that healing could be a profession, that caring for minds was as important as caring for bodies. "In Japan, we were taught to suppress difficult emotions," she told him. "Gaman, endure silently, show no weakness." "But I think that philosophy broke something in us," Miller nodded. "America has its own version. We tell men to be tough, to push through, to never show vulnerability. It's destructive here too. Real strength is acknowledging pain and working through it." These conversations, conducted through Nakamura's patient translation, built trust that went beyond simple doctor-patient relationships. Miller wasn't just treating bodies, he was recognizing humanity. Naomi's breakthrough came through unexpected channels. While working in the administrative office, she discovered a filing error that would have caused problems with supply orders. She brought it to the attention of the chief clerk, Corporal James Walsh, who initially seemed annoyed at being corrected. But after verifying her observation, Walsh's attitude shifted dramatically. "You just saved us from a major headache," he admitted through Nakamura. "How'd you spot that?" Naomi explained that she had managed supply records in the Japanese military hospital. Organization systems were similar regardless of country. Good filing made everything else possible. Walsh, impressed, began consulting Naomi on organizational improvements. Their working relationship evolved into mutual respect. He brought her coffee during breaks. She taught him a more efficient system for day, tracking inventory. Language barriers became less important as professional competence spoke its own language. For these women, every positive interaction created cognitive dissonance. They had been raised to believe in Japanese superiority and American barbarism, yet here they were, being treated better by supposed barbarians than they had been treated by their own military. The Americans gave them choices, respected their dignity, and valued their contributions. One evening, Yuki voiced what many were thinking. "We were taught that Americans were devils without culture or honor, but they have music and poetry. They grieve their dead and treasure their families. They work hard and laugh easily. They're generous to enemies. What does that make us for believing the lies?" Hana had no answer. None of them did. They were living through a transformation that would take years to fully understand. Each kindness chipped away at propaganda. Each conversation revealed common humanity. Each day made returning to Japan's certainties more complicated. September 17th, 1945. Autumn arrived in Wisconsin with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. The camp's surroundings transformed into a palette of orange, red, and gold that none of the Japanese women had experienced. Japan had autumn colors, but these Midwestern forests exploded with intensity that seemed almost unreal. Lieutenant Martinez organized a supervised walk through the nearby woods. 15 women participated, including Hana, Yuki, and Naomi. The beauty was overwhelming. Private Reed, assigned as one of the guards, pointed out different tree species, while Nakamura translated. Oak, maple, birch. Each had distinct leaves and unique autumn displays. "This is what we're fighting for," Reed said quietly, gesturing at the forest. "Not conquest or glory. Just the right to live in places like this, peacefully, with people we love." The simplicity of that statement struck deep. Japan's militarists had spoken of destiny, superiority, and empire. This American soldier just wanted to live peacefully in beautiful places. The contrast was profound. During the walk, Sergeant Miller pointed out edible plants and medicinal herbs, explaining that his grandfather had been a country doctor who taught him wilderness medicine. Hana listened intently, asking questions that revealed her growing comfort with these strange captors. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man," she said through Nakamura. "He was. Died when I was 12. But he taught me that healing isn't just medicine. It's understanding that every person carries invisible wounds. Our job is to be gentle with each other." That philosophy, so different from the harsh discipline of Japanese military culture, was changing how Hana understood strength. Real strength wasn't suppressing emotion. It was acknowledging vulnerability and supporting each other through it. Back at camp, Sergeant Marconi introduced Yuki to the concept of American Sunday dinners. He had arranged a special meal featuring his family's recipes: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, homemade bread, and pie for dessert. Portions were generous, flavors were rich, and the act of sharing food created an intimacy that transcended language. In my family, Marconi explained through Nakamura, Sunday dinner is sacred. Doesn't matter what happened during the week. On Sunday, we gather, we eat, we remember, we're family. You women are far from your families, so you're family here now. That casual adoption into an American concept of family overwhelmed several women to tears. They weren't prisoners anymore, not really. They were displaced people being offered belonging. Naomi experienced her own revelation through correspondence. Her Red Cross message had finally reached her sister's family in Hiroshima. The reply, when it arrived, was devastating. Her sister had survived the atomic bombing, but was suffering from radiation sickness. Her young nephew was caring for her. They had no food, no medicine, no hope. Naomi brought the letter to Sergeant Miller during sick call hours, her hands shaking. Miller read through Nakamura's translation with a grave expression. I need to send them help, Naomi said. Medicine, food, money, anything. Miller didn't hesitate. We'll figure something out. The Red Cross can facilitate packages. I'll donate from my pay if needed. You're not alone in this. That promise, made without hesitation to help enemy civilians, exemplified everything that confused Naomi about these Americans. They should hate her people. Instead, they offered help. Over the following week, Miller organized a collection among American personnel. Soldiers donated money, food, medicine, and supplies. Within 10 days, a substantial package was sent through Red Cross channels to Naomi's sister. The generosity was overwhelming. Men who had fought against Japan, some of whom had lost brothers and friends, were now sending aid to Japanese civilians. When Naomi tried to thank Miller, he simply shook his head. Your sister's sick. She needs help. That's all that matters. We're not at war with Japanese families. We never were. We were at war with militarism and aggression. The war's over now. Time to help people heal. September 24th, 1945. Colonel Anderson requested another formal meeting. The women gathered in the recreation hall with familiar anxiety. These meetings always brought significant news. Anderson entered with his usual calm dignity. He waited for silence, then spoke slowly for Nakamura's translation. Ladies, I have important news about your repatriation status. The United States government has finalized procedures for returning Japanese prisoners of war to Japan. Ships will begin departing from West Coast ports in November. You will be processed and transported according to your wishes. He paused, letting Nakamura complete the translation. However, I want to present you with another option. The United States Immigration Service has created a special program for Japanese nationals who wish to remain in America. This program allows former prisoners of war to apply for temporary residency permits, with the possibility of permanent status after background checks and processing. The room erupted in whispers. Nakamura had to call for quiet to continue translating. To be absolutely clear, Anderson continued, this is not pressure to stay. You are completely free to return to Japan with our assistance and support. But if you choose to remain in the United States, to build new lives here, that option exists. The decision is entirely yours. He explained the practical details. Applicants would need sponsors, Americans willing to vouch for them and help with initial settlement. They would need employment, either in agricultural work, domestic service, or other positions. They would need housing, though temporary barracks housing could be arranged initially. The process would take months, possibly years to complete. I've already spoken with community leaders in nearby towns, Anderson added. There are families willing to sponsor Japanese women who want to stay. Farms need workers. Households need help. You would be welcomed, not as enemies, but as people starting over. After Anderson dismissed them, chaos erupted in the barracks. Some women immediately wanted to apply. Others were horrified at the suggestion of abandoning Japan. Arguments broke out. Tears flowed. The impossible choice had become terribly real. Hana, Yuki, and Naomi sat together trying to process the implications. Staying meant choosing America over Japan. It meant declaring that their enemy had been more humane than their homeland. It meant accepting that everything they had believed was wrong. My family is in Japan, Naomi said. My sister needs me. How can I stay here in comfort while she suffers? My family's restaurant might still exist, Yuki added. They need GRU. Help rebuilding. Am I selfish for wanting to stay where I feel safe? Hana spoke quietly. I have family in Japan too, but I also have nothing. No home, no job, no place in a society that will see me as a returned prisoner. Here, I could build something new. Is that betrayal or survival? That night, Sergeant Miller found Hana in the library. She was reading, but not really processing words. He sat down with Nakamura following. "The colonel's announcement has you thinking hard," Miller observed. Hana nodded. "In Japan, we have a concept called giri, duty to family, to country, to tradition. Staying here violates all of that. But I've also learned a new concept here. The idea that individuals have the right to choose their own path. Both can be true," Miller said gently. "You can honor your Japanese heritage while building an American future. They're not mutually exclusive. Immigrants do it all the time." October 1st, 1945, the Red Cross delivered mail that changed everything. Naomi's sister had written again. Her condition was worsening. She begged Naomi to return, not just for help but for closure. "I want to see you before I die," the letter read. "Please come home." Naomi collapsed. The guilt she had been suppressing crashed over her like a wave. While she debated staying in comfortable America, her sister was dying alone in irradiated rubble. The choice suddenly seemed monstrous. How could she possibly stay? Sergeant Miller found her sobbing in her bunk. Through Nakamura, he learned about the letter. His response was gentle but direct. "This is the hardest kind of situation. No choice is wrong, but both feel impossible. She's dying," Naomi said through tears. "My sister, the only family I have left. She needs me, but I'm terrified of going back. Does that make me a coward?" Miller sat down carefully, respecting proper distance. "It makes you human. Fear doesn't make you a coward. Acting despite fear makes you brave. Whether you go or stay, you're facing something terrifying." Over the next week, Naomi wrestled with her decision. Other women watched her struggle, seeing their own conflicts reflected in her pain. The American soldiers tried to help without influencing her choice. They offered information about travel arrangements to Japan. They also offered information about bringing family members to America eventually, though that process would take years. Hana tried to comfort her friend. "Whatever you choose, it comes from love. Love for your sister. Love for yourself. Both are valid." But Naomi couldn't escape the guilt. She drafted a repatriation request 3 times, then tore each one up. She drafted a stay application twice and destroyed those too. Every option felt like betrayal. Private Reed, watching this agony, spoke to Colonel Anderson. The colonel's response was characteristically wise. He requested a meeting with Naomi alone, with Nakamura translating. "I can't tell you what to choose," Anderson said, "but I can tell you what I've learned in 30 years of military service. Survival is not selfishness. Taking care of yourself is not abandoning others. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is become strong enough to help later." He explained something Naomi hadn't considered. If she returned to Japan now, sick and traumatized herself, how much help could she really provide? But if she stayed in America, recovered, built a life, earned money, she could send far more help than her physical presence could provide. "Your sister wrote asking you to come home," Anderson said, "but maybe what she really needs is knowing you're safe and thriving somewhere. Maybe the best gift you can give her is survival." That perspective shifted something in Naomi's thinking. She wrote to her sister explaining her dilemma. The response, when it came 3 weeks later, was unexpected. "Stay in America," her sister wrote. "Live for both of us. Send me letters about beautiful things. Let me know our family survives somewhere, even if I don't." The guilt remained, but now it was joined by permission. Permission to survive. Permission to choose healing over duty. Permission to build a future instead of returning to ashes. October 15th, 1945. The deadline for repatriation decisions was approaching. November 1st, 2 weeks away. The camp buzzed with anxiety as women finalized their choices. Of the original 43 prisoners, 17 had requested repatriation. They packed meager belongings and prepared for the journey home. 26, including Hana, Yuki, and Naomi, had submitted applications to remain in America. The division created tension. Women who were leaving felt abandoned by those who stayed. Women who stayed felt judged by those who left. The unity forged through shared captivity was fracturing under the weight of impossible choices. Both groups were right. Both groups were wrong. There were no good answers, only different paths through grief. Private Reed organized a farewell gathering for those departing. Not a celebration, exactly, but an acknowledgement of shared experience. American soldiers and Japanese women gathered in the recreation hall for a final meal together. Sergeant Marconi prepared his best dishes. Lieutenant Martinez donated books and supplies for the journey. Colonel Anderson gave each departing woman a letter of commendation, documenting their dignified conduct as prisoners of war. The atmosphere was bittersweet. Women who had lived together for months said tearful goodbyes. Addresses were exchanged, though everyone knew correspondence would be difficult. Promises to write were made knowing they might not be kept. The war had ended, but its aftermath would separate them permanently. Yuki embraced one of the departing women, a young nurse named Keiko who had worked beside her in the camp kitchen. "You're brave for going back," Yuki said through tears. "So are you for staying," Keiko replied. "Different. Kinds of courage. Same war." That night, after the departures had been finalized, the remaining 26 women gathered in their barracks. The space felt emptier, lonelier. They were committed now. No turning back. They had chosen America over Japan, future over past, possibility over certainty. Sergeant Miller met with each woman individually to discuss next steps. His meetings with Hana revealed how much both had changed. They no longer needed Nakamura's constant presence. Hana's English had improved enough for basic conversation. Miller had learned some Japanese phrases. Communication was imperfect but genuine. "You'll be sponsored by a family in Madison," Miller explained. "The Johnsons. They own a bakery and need help. Room, board, and wages." "It's a good situation," Hana nodded, trying to imagine this future. Working in an American bakery, living with strangers who would become family, building a life from nothing. "I'm scared," she admitted. "That's normal. Starting over is terrifying. But you're stronger than you think. You survived war, capture, and choosing a new path. You'll survive this too." Miller had his own news. He would be discharged in December and returning to university to study psychology. He planned to specialize in treating war trauma. The work he had done with these Japanese women had shown him his calling. "Will we stay in contact?" Hana asked, the question more vulnerable than she intended. Miller smiled. "If you want to, I'd like that. You've taught me a lot about healing and resilience. I don't want to lose that friendship." Yuki's sponsorship was arranged through a farming family near Green Bay. They needed help with harvest work initially, then household management. The farm was large, prosperous, and welcoming. The family had written to Yuki, introducing themselves and expressing genuine interest in helping her build a new life. Private Reed had been instrumental in arranging this placement. His own family in Iowa had connected Yuki with the Wisconsin farmers through community networks. He visited her the night before processing began. "You're going to do great," Reed said. "These are good people. They'll treat you right." "How do you know?" Yuki asked. "Because I asked them one question. I asked if they saw you as cheap labor or as a person who deserves a chance. Their answer told me everything I needed to know." Naomi's situation was more complex. She would work as a domestic helper for a doctor's family in Milwaukee while continuing to send support to her sister in Japan. The arrangement allowed her to earn money, learn English, and eventually bring family members to America if possible. It wasn't perfect, but it was a foundation. November 1st, 1945. The processing day arrived. 26 Japanese women lined up in the administration building, receiving final paperwork for their new lives. Social security cards, temporary work permits, immigration documentation. Each woman received a small stipend to help with initial expenses. Each was assigned a sponsor family who had agreed to provide housing and employment. Colonel Anderson addressed them one final time. "Ladies, what you're doing takes extraordinary courage. You're choosing to build bridges instead of nursing wounds. You're choosing hope over bitterness. America is better for having you here." The women were transported in groups to their new placements. Hana, Yuki, and Naomi rode together in an army truck toward Madison. The Wisconsin countryside rolled past, farms and forests preparing for winter. Everything was unknown. Everything was possible. They arrived at a church in Madison where sponsor families waited. The Johnsons, a middle-aged couple with kind faces, greeted Hana warmly. Mrs. Johnson offered her hand. Mr. Johnson carried her single bag. Their teenage daughter smiled shyly. This was family now, strange and foreign, but genuine in their welcome. Yuki met the Olson family, farmers whose weathered faces and strong handshakes reminded her of rural people everywhere. They loaded her into a pickup truck, talking enthusiastically about the farm, the animals, the community. Their acceptance was immediate and unquestioning. Naomi's doctor-employer, Dr. Robert Harris, arrived with his wife, Eleanor. They explained her duties calmly, treating her as a professional hire rather than charity case. Eleanor emphasized that Naomi would have her own room, time off, and fair wages. "We need help," Eleanor said simply. "You need a start. It's a fair exchange." As sponsors and women departed, Sergeant Miller and Private Reed watched from the church steps. They had accomplished something remarkable. They had turned enemies into friends, prisoners into immigrants, war into peace. The transformation was complete. 26 women who had arrived at Camp McCoy expecting brutality had instead discovered humanity. They had been offered freedom to leave and chose freedom to stay. Their decision wasn't rejection of Japan but affirmation of possibility. They were building new identities that honored their past while embracing their future. In the following years, their stories would unfold in remarkably diverse ways. Hana would marry an American veteran and open a small Japanese tea shop in Madison, becoming a bridge between cultures. Yuki would eventually bring her parents to America, reuniting her family on Wisconsin soil. Naomi would earn enough to bring her nephew from Japan, giving him opportunities she never had. Sergeant Miller and Hana would maintain correspondence for decades, their friendship evolving into something profound. Their letters, preserved in university archives, documented the healing power of choosing compassion over hatred. Private Reed would visit Yuki's farm regularly until the visits became too frequent to be coincidental. They would marry in 1948, scandalous to some, but celebrated by those who knew their story. The women who had returned to Japan would write occasionally, describing difficult but meaningful lives, rebuilding their homeland. No path was wrong. Both groups had chosen authentically. By 1950, all 26 women had established roots in America. They had learned English, earned citizenship, built careers, and created families. They gathered annually on August 7th, the anniversary of their arrival at Camp McCoy, to remember their transformation. At the 1950 reunion, Hana stood to speak. Her English was fluent now, her confidence remarkable. "We came to America as enemies," she said. "We leave this gathering as proof that mercy defeats hatred. Kindness transforms hearts. And humanity transcends nationality. We were prisoners who begged to stay. Now we are Americans who remember being Japanese." Both identities honor the journey. The story of these women would eventually reach historians interested in unusual war narratives. Their testimony would emphasize a simple truth. The greatest victory wasn't military but moral. America had won these women not through force but through the revolutionary act of treating enemies with dignity. Their legacy lived on through children and grandchildren who grew up hearing stories about Camp McCoy, about the cup of tea that changed everything, about soldiers who chose kindness when cruelty was expected, about women who chose possibility when retreat was easier. The war had ended with atomic fire and unconditional surrender, but it also ended with 26 women discovering that their enemy possessed something their propaganda never mentioned: simple human decency. That discovery, multiplied across thousands of similar encounters, built the post-war peace more effectively than any treaty. Former enemies became allies because individuals chose mercy over vengeance. The prisoners of war who begged to stay became living proof that transformation was possible, that bridges could be built even across the deepest divides, that the future didn't have to repeat the past. Their story whispered a quiet truth. War ends when people stop seeing enemies and start seeing humans. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.